How does a sport attract 300,000 fans a week, garner millions of TV viewers, and become the national sport of a country, all in the span of just 160 years? This is the entire history of the AFL. Victorian cricket captain Tom Wills invented Australian rules football in 1858 as a way for cricketers to keep fit during the winter. How did Wills come up with the idea? He took inspiration from the indigenous sport of marngrook, where teams kick and mark a circular ball made from possum skin and filled with charcoal. The aim of marngrook was to simply display better skills than your opposition, done through outstanding kicking or high leaping marks. The game had no scoring system, and the matches began with the best player on the field simply starting with the ball. Wills held the first official game of Australian rules football that same year. It was played between Victorian schools Scotch College and Melbourne Grammar on the parklands just outside the MCG. The match was first team to kick 2 goals wins, but after 3 consecutive Saturdays of play, neither team had achieved this feat, and the scoreline was stuck at 1 goal apiece. Probably had something to do with the ground being 4 times the size of the MCG. Interestingly enough, both teams were allowed to choose their own umpires for the match, if only the Crows had that choice. 1858 saw the creation of Aussie rules' oldest team, the Melbourne Football Club. Melbourne played their first match against the South Yarra Football Club in late September, and were able to secure the win. For this game, both teams played with 26 men aside. The Geelong Football Club followed Melbourne's footsteps in 1859, becoming just the second Aussie rules team in the sport's so far short history. 1859 was also the same year that Tom Wills created the first 10 rules of Aussie rules. Many of these rules are still used to this day, including the coin toss, distance between goalposts, marking, out of bounds, and handball rules. Straight after these rule changes, Aussie rules games became a regular occurrence at a huge number of parks all across Melbourne. The next year, in 1860, politician John Brodie Spence formed the Adelaide Football Club, the first South Australian Aussie rules team in history. It's important to note that this is not the same Adelaide team that roams the AFL today. By 1864, Carlton had been established, quickly followed by the formation of Queensland's first Aussie rules team, the Brisbane Football Club, in 1866. Then came the arrival of many other new teams across the country, including North Melbourne in 1869, Port Adelaide in 1870, Essendon in 1872, St Kilda in 1873, and South Melbourne, the current Sydney Swans, in 1874. The newfound sport of Aussie rules was starting to spread all throughout Australia, gaining nationwide recognition in the process. New Zealand became just the second country to adopt Aussie rules in 1868, and it saw great success among the Kiwis. This has expanded to the point where nowadays, 5 of New Zealand's 16 regions have their own organised competitions. New Zealand was even the AFL's country of choice for the first match outside of Australia in 2013, which saw Sydney beat St Kilda by 16 points at Wellington Stadium. By the 1870s, games were being hosted at the MCG, regularly attracting crowds of 10,000 people, eager to witness this new and unique sport. The SANFL was created in 1877 and is currently the oldest state league competition in Australia. But wouldn't the oldest league be the VFL? Well no, the VFL was surprisingly created a week later. Kind of. You see, these leagues weren't called the VFL and SANFL. They were called the VFA and the SAFA, the Victorian Football Association and South Australian Football Association, respectively. The first interstate match between Victoria and South Australia was played in 1879, where Victoria destroyed SA 56-3. The 10,000 strong crowd showed the popularity of the concept, which paved the way for the future State of Origins and E.J. Whitten Legends matches. South Tasmania and Queensland soon opened their own leagues that same year, and New South Wales followed suit in 1881, before Western Australia did so as well in 1885. In 1888, Championship of Australia was launched, a football tournament between all clubs from the Victorian, South Australian, Western Australian and Tasmanian football leagues. The first year of competition saw Norwood and South Melbourne face off in 3 consecutive matches at Kensington Oval in South Australia, with Norwood winning every game and claiming the championship. From that point on, the winner was decided by a singular grand final instead. The tournament eventually ended in 1975, with Port Adelaide winning the most titles, accumulating 4 across the 19 total seasons. The VFL was formed in 1896, with 8 clubs to its name, all the current Victorian teams except for Hawthorn, North Melbourne, Richmond and the Western Bulldogs. Team sizes reduced from 20 per side to 18, while most players were now getting paid, thanks to the Australian economy seeing high growth. The first VFL game commenced in 1897 at the Fitzroy Cricket Ground. In this game, Fitzroy defeated Carlton 49-16. 1908 saw clubs Richmond and University accepted into the VFL after a vote between the 8 founding clubs agreed to their inclusion. This was the same year that the first National Carnival was held in Melbourne, an interstate competition between nearly every state, with the addition of New Zealand. These carnivals continued until 1977, when they would transform into the State of Origin competition. In 1915, the first recorded women's football match was held in Western Australia to fundraise money for the construction of the Arch of Victory, a structure to commemorate the 60,000 soldiers killed in the gunfire of World War I. All major football leagues were suspended for their 1916 seasons, except for the VFL. Why exactly? Well, there was a little war going on at the time called World War I. Now, the VFL did continue, but with only 4 of its 8 teams, making Fitzroy's 1916 premiership not as fulfilling for the club as it should have been. The Brownlow Medal was introduced in 1924 as a way to recognise the best and fairest player in the VFL for a particular season. The medal was named after former Geelong player and VFL president Charles Brownlow, to honour the tremendous respect he earned from the entire football community throughout his prestigious career. 1925 was the year that Footscray, Hawthorn and North Melbourne joined the VFL, so at this point the VFL had a total of 12 teams. The 1929 season was record-breaking, with Gordon Coventry becoming the first player in the VFL, WAFL or SANFL to kick 100 goals in a season, surpassing it with an impressive 124 goals. SANFL player Ken Farmer would score 100 goals in the 1930 season, 1 year later, and continue the feat for an astounding 10 seasons in a row afterwards. Coventry had opened the goal-scoring floodgates wide open. While the VFL continued throughout all of World War II, the same cannot be said for the SANFL, which was suspended for 3 years, from 1942 to 1945. However, the VFL did lose Geelong, who withdrew from the competition for 2 years, rejoining in 1944. By 1945, the SANFL competition had resumed. The first official All-Australian team was selected in 1953 and based on players' performances at the Australian Football Carnival of that year, not their performance throughout the season, as it's based on today. In that 1953 side was John Coleman, someone we'll be talking about in just a moment. 1958 was a historic year for the game of Australian rules football, as it celebrated the 100th year of the sport's history. A plaque was created to celebrate the milestone, and it remains at the MCG to this day. The 1970 grand final between Collingwood and Carlton amassed an enormous crowd of 121,000 people, making it the largest attendance for an Australian rules football game in history up until that point. That record still hasn't been broken to this day. Carlton won the grand final by 10 points. Before 1976, each football game only had one field umpire, but 1976 saw the introduction of the 2-umpire system, which obviously helped increase the accuracy of officiating decisions. Eventually, this was increased to 3 umpires in 1994, and in 2023, further increased to 4 umpires, but that obviously hasn't helped the high number of poor umpiring decisions that continue to be made. Hotel manager Leon Larkin founded State of Origin in 1977, with players split into teams based on the state they played most of their junior footy in. Sadly, the tournament only lasted 20 years, with the last match between Victoria and South Australia in 1999. However, a tribute match was played in 2008 between the Dream Team and Victoria to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Australian rules football. John Coleman kicked 12 goals on debut in 1949, 120 goals in just his second season the next year, and won premierships in both of these years. The man could have won 3 premierships in a row had he not been controversially suspended for the 1951 Grand Final. And so it seems fitting that in 1981, the Coleman Medal was created, given to the player who kicks the most goals in the home and away season. This ensures Coleman's legacy will never be forgotten. 1981 was the same year that the first VFL National Draft was held, and it used pretty much the exact same drafting system that we use today. The team that finished last in the 1981 season got the first pick, second to last got the second pick, and so on. 1982 was the same year that South Melbourne relocated to Sydney, and thus the Sydney Swans were born. But it would be 23 long years until the club would break a record 72-year premiership drought. The Brisbane Bears and West Coast Eagles were both formed in 1986 and joined the VFL for the 1987 season. The VFL changed its name to the AFL in 1990, preparing for a huge influx of interstate teams set to soon enter the league. These included Adelaide in 1991, Fremantle in 1995, and Port and Brisbane in 1997. West Coast's 1992 Grand Final win over Geelong by 28 points made them the first club outside of Victoria to win a premiership. The VFL was truly starting to become the AFL. Western Australia quickly saw more representation, with Fremantle joining the AFL in 1995. In 1996, the Brisbane Bears and Fitzroy Lions officially merged to create the Brisbane Lions. Teams outside of Victoria began to see tremendous amounts of success at the AFL level. Adelaide became the first South Australian club to win a premiership with their 31-point win over North Melbourne in the 1997 Grand Final. Brisbane quickly followed suit with their 26-point win over Essendon, securing them the 2001 premiership, making them the first Queensland-based club to do so. Finally, Sydney's 4-point 2005 Grand Final win over West Coast, thanks to Leo Barry, marked the first premiership for a New South Wales AFL team. The Gold Coast Suns were established in 2009, playing their first ever game against Carlton in round 2 of the 2011 season, where they were thumped by 119 points. Although Gold Coast received the wooden spoon that year, only winning 3 games for the entire season, the AFL thought, hey, why not bring a second new team into the league? And so, the GWS Giants were born, kind of. The club was officially formed in 2009, but they were forced to wait 3 years for a league debut, which eventually came in round 1 of the 2012 season, in a game against the Swans. They were destroyed by 63 points. The AFL introduced the AFLW in September 2016. The first game commenced in February the next year, where Carlton demolished Collingwood by 35 points, a huge margin for AFLW standards. Half of the 8 teams in that first round couldn't score more than 2 goals, while the 3 games only attracted 24,000 people, signs that the AFLW had a lot to overcome, both skill and crowd-wise. The AFLW expanded to 10 teams in 2019, with the addition of Geelong and North Melbourne. The next year saw more teams join the competition, in Gold Coast, Richmond, St Kilda and the West Coast Eagles. By 2023, every single AFL club had their own AFLW team. The 2017 match between Gold Coast and Port at Jiangwan Stadium in Shanghai, China, was Gillon McLachlan's plan to leave the AFL's mark on the international stage. And it turned out okay. A crowd of 10,000 people was amazing for the first game in a new country, but Port's 72-point thumping of Gold Coast definitely bored the crowd. However, I'm sure Justin Westhoff's freak goal out of midair surely won back a few fans. The 2020 season saw the AFL change for the worst, thanks to the pandemic. The repercussions were that quarters were shortened to 16 minutes, the season was shut down for months on end, teams were forced to isolate, and the grand final was played at the Gabba in Brisbane. Not to mention it was a night grand final. New rules were introduced for the 2021 AFL season that completely changed how the game was played. The stand rule was the most influential of these, penalising defenders who moved while on the mark. This has led to so many 50-metre penalties in recent years that it's not even funny, and it's an issue that the AFL needs to address immediately. And that's the entire 160-year history of the AFL in just 15 minutes.